Welcome to MilSpouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to encouraging military spouses. I'm your host, Jen McDonald, and I was a military spouse for nearly 30 years until my husband's retirement. I'm now the mom of 4 young adults, including 1 active duty son. I also wrote the book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. Through my experiences, I came to believe that we're only stronger together. Whatever life is throwing your way as a military spouse, let's talk about it. So hello and welcome to episode 77. Happy 2022. It is mid-January as I record this, so I know you're already well into the year. I've already heard from some of you and how you're facing deployments, moves, or have just recently moved in this new year. So one thing I see often at the beginning of the new year is your word for the year. And if you've just been through something like I just mentioned, like a move, it can kind of seem silly to have a quote word for the year or goals because you just don't know what military life is going to bring, or you're right in the middle of an upheaval. So I will be talking about how to set goals when you're not sure what military life will bring on the next episode. Because we have to come at these things a little bit differently as military spouses. So be sure to sign up for my newsletter. You can get it right on the homepage, jen-mcdonald.com, or there's a sign up, I believe, in my Instagram, the link in profile. If it's not there, I'll add it. And that way you can stay up to date on more information about the amazing guests on the podcast, some of the offerings that I do season to season, or content that might help you, as well as any discounts. So I always shoot those out on the email list. So if you subscribe, you'll be one of the first to know what's coming and all the freebies and discounts and things like that. So I only send it out about once or twice a month. My goal is to do it weekly. That's never happened. So you don't have to worry about getting a ton of email from me because I know how that is. Also, something else kind of cool is you can now rate podcasts on Spotify. So I know a lot of you like to listen to the show on Spotify. So if you just would go and just click the little stars, 5 stars, please, that helps to get the show more visibility and get it out in front of other people. So that would be amazing if you did that. So for this week's iteration of Jen's favorite things, I have a few for this new year. One of the most exciting things happening right now is that my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, is coming out in its 2nd edition. So what that means is basically it's under a new imprint. And so we had to completely republish it. And it has an amazing new cover. I think it's a little bit easier to read. There's more space for journaling. If you don't know about my book, it is a 30-day devotional, all sorts of topics to do with military life. And it has, like, every day's reading has some sort of story or vignette from my military life, and then tips for spouses, which we call basic training for spouses. And then there is related scripture and journal prompts. So it's truly a devotional. And while I would say most of the content is the same, there are just a few little updates, and it is just, I think, a little bit easier to read. So the first edition came out in 2016, and this updated edition, 2022, super exciting. And it has stayed a bestseller on Amazon in the devotional and military families category. So I really do thank all of you that have supported me and bought the book or gifted it. It's a great gift for spouses groups. If you're looking for something to include in like a welcome basket, just reach out to me because I can give you some discount pricing if you buy 10 or more copies. So on that note, in the Christian Military Spouses Facebook group, we will be doing a book study with me on my book starting in the beginning of February. Right now, you can pre-order the new edition on Amazon Kindle only. They only do pre-orders on Kindle. And then the print will be coming out, should be the end of this month. So by the time this comes out, it should be pretty close to coming out or maybe already live. So just take a look there. And it will also be available for libraries and other bookstores. And that's something that it wasn't before. But with this new imprint, we're able to get it out to different places. So that is exciting as well. My other favorite thing this week, speaking of writing, I know a lot of writers. I know a lot of you feel called to write, love writing. And so if it's something that you are interested in, Legacy Magazine and Lindsay Swoboda was a guest on the podcast back when we first started. I would love to have her back on again. They have released a writing course specifically for the service member community, and they are enrolling now for the winter session, which is called the Work of Words, starting January 25th. But by the time when this is released, you can go sign up, and I will add the link for that, the Work of Words winter course. It is something that you would pay for. So honestly, for myself, and I have talked about this before, one of the things that changed me as a writer, I had dabbled in freelance writing for years when my kids were small. And then as they got a little bit older, and I found, because I was a homeschooling mom and I was a stay-at-home mom, I had been in a completely different field before I had stayed home with my kids, but I'd always loved writing. And so had done some freelance work here and there. But one of the things that changed the course of my writing was to take some courses, some professional courses. And it was during one of our moves. I think I've told this story before. We had moved from Germany to Hawaii. We had dropped our oldest son off at college. This is about, oh my goodness, he turned 30 this year, which is crazy to me. But so it's about 12 years ago. And I was starting to feel like, if I'm going to make this whole writing thing work, what do I need to do? And so we were in Hawaii. I was a little bit depressed, which sounds silly because I was in Hawaii, but life was changing, and it was our first one out of the nest. And so we were in temporary lodging for about, I don't even remember, 6 to 8 weeks waiting for housing. And so one thing I did was take a bunch of online writing courses. Couldn't even tell you all of them now. They're probably not even around. And one of them was one for freelance writers. One was like writing for magazines, which was what I really wanted to do. And I did end up doing. So all of that to say, it really did change the course of what I ended up doing with writing. So I'm not making any guarantees about this Legacy Magazine course. I'm sure that it'll be outstanding. I know Lindsay. I think she's amazing. I think that you would love working with her and gleaning from this course. So one thing they are offering is a 7 practices to nourish your writing, even in the midst of military life, to help you develop a sustainable writing or creativity routine. Often, if you're a creative person, you really thrive on being able to create something, whether it's writing or art or whatever it is that your passion is. And those tend to get put on the back burner because of the demands of military life. So I would encourage you to try to make time for that in the margins of your military life. And actually, this is what they say, to come alongside you in the narrow margins of military life. Legacy Magazine and Lindsay Swoboda have created a guide to help you discover your own pace and nourish your creativity. And you can grab that free guide. I will link to that. So 2 things, a free guide to help you nourish your writing, and then an actual paid course, which is called the Work of Words Winter Course by Legacy Magazine. And that starts January 25th. So if you are interested, run, don't walk to sign up, because I do believe there are limited spaces. So on to this episode. I am so excited to be talking to Chelsea Davis from the Submerged Life. You'll hear a little bit about how I found her, but I found them through Instagram because they share some hilarious memes and just kind of relatable to military spouse life. And though I am, obviously not a Navy spouse or a submarine spouse, I think that's a specialty of a specialty. They have such a great sense of humor about military life and submarine spouse life specifically. And so they've created a space to support that community. But so much of what they say applies to any military spouse. And they are creating resources, funny moments, just kind of there to support you. So I've heard from a lot of you that you've wanted to hear more Navy spouses. So here we are, the first episode of 2022. We recorded this at the end of last year, and you will hear a little thing at the end. She was in the middle of, I believe, a giant windstorm, and her internet went out, and so we had to reconnect on another platform. So you may hear a little bit of a sound difference, hopefully not too much, but it's just the last couple of minutes of our talk, but such good stuff. And I think you'll enjoy hearing from Chelsea. She's one of 3 founders of the blog, The Submerged Life. So let's get right into my talk with Chelsea. So hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, I am talking to Chelsea Davis. Chelsea Davis, Meagan Guise, and Kaileigh Lear are Navy spouses, and they are the founders of the blog, The Submerged Life. As newly christened submarine spouses, it didn't take them long to realize the resources they needed weren't as readily available, and so it all began. They launched the Submerged Life in 2019 and have since built a community for sub spouses and families from around the world. Written by spouses for spouses, their blog is your guide to living and loving the submarine life. So you can connect with them at thesubmergedlife.com and on Instagram and Facebook at The Submerged Life. And as always, we'll link these in the episode notes. So I've had a lot of requests for more Navy spouse interviews, and I know we've never had the submarine field represented. So I first discovered the Submerged Life through some funny memes on Instagram and loved their account and knew I had to reach out to these great ladies. So today, like I said, I am talking to Chelsea Davis. So welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to be talking to you today. And we gave a little bit of your background, but I would love for you to share your unique military spouse background before we get into all the ins and outs of submarine life, because I think it's going to be really interesting. Whether listeners are submarine spouses or not, it'll be great for them. But if not, I think it's just always interesting to hear about the other service branches.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. So I met my husband in 2013. And I grew up in Washington State. I grew up in a Navy town. Of course, my family was kind of the odd ones out, and we actually weren't affiliated with the Navy at all. But all my friends growing up, my childhood, high school, middle school, everyone had parents in the Navy. And at that point, I kind of took the stance of, I'm never going to marry in the Navy. I'm never going to date a guy in the Navy. I'm never going to be a military spouse. And then I went to college and studied journalism and public relations, and I moved to Seattle. And lo and behold, I met my now husband, who was a submariner. And
of course.
Yes. So we met and we dated for 5 years before we got married. So while we were dating, he lived a ferry ride away. I lived and worked in Seattle. And I wasn't as privy to the Navy life. He was kind of more of a weekend boyfriend. He'd go out to sea for weeks, a few months at a time. I was living my best life with, my college girlfriends in an apartment and, doing my thing and working. And, I just wasn't privy to that lifestyle. And then we did a long distance year. He went to Bahrain for a year. And then eventually we moved to California and got married. So we got married in 2018. And basically, my inspiration for the blog kind of started when we got married, because I had no idea what I was doing and had no handbook, no guidebook to this crazy life and just all the acronyms and the way of life. So it just, I think, a combination of my background in journalism and storytelling and writing naturally kind of fell into this place. And then taking a break from working professionally. We had our son about 2 years ago. So this blog's just been a really fun, positive outlet for me to channel my passion for writing, but also navigating this crazy life.
Yeah. Wow. And so you're fairly new spouses, but you saw a need and decided, you know what, we need to fill this. And how did you connect with your other founders of the blog? Were you guys already friends in real life, or was it something more remote?
Yeah. So it was my friend Meagan. Our husbands were friends at the Naval Academy in college. And I was, having a glass of wine with her one night and just sort of told her this wild idea I had. And she's that friend that will really kind of push you. And I'm the friend that needs to be pushed sometimes. So
it's a good combination.
Yes. And so just kind of telling her some of my experiences and just this idea I had, and she really ran with it and said, we have to do it. My friend Kaileigh has a similar sentiment about this, like, let's get together, let's do this. But the inspiration for the blog really came from, we were living in Monterey, California at the time. My husband was going to the Naval postgraduate school, which sounds as miserable as it does because Monterey is beautiful and we would give any chance to move back. But we got married, and then kind of like hit the road, we had to move to Connecticut. So Groton, Connecticut is more or less, they call it the submarine capital of the world. That's basically the main duty station for submarines. That's where all the training is. That's where the submarines get built and repaired. So we had to go for 6 months for my husband's training. Then we were going to move theoretically to another duty station. So we get in the car, again, getting married. I got my military ID. That was about the extent of what I knew this military life was. We're on the road, maybe in the middle of Kansas, just middle of nowhere. Got all of our life in our car, our Corgi, driving off into the sunset. And we get a call from the detailer. And the detailer, for those who don't know, kind of assigns your next job. And the detailer informs my husband that we are going to Guam.
Oh, I did not realize that.
I have a massive meltdown in the car. We were given, the opportunity to place, our top 5 preferences for a duty station, of course. And Guam was never at the top. And I was just so confused and overwhelmed. We just got married. I'm working still. I can't point Guam out on a map. I don't know anything about Guam.
Now.
I can now. And I'm very type A and get into problem solving mode. So I have this meltdown and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start Googling. We're going to figure this out. All right, Guam. And so I'm Googling and I'm just not finding what I need. Guam had a really great tourism website. Come visit Guam, blah, blah, blah. But nothing about like picking up your life and moving to Guam. And I'm just kind of freaking out. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm looking up flights. They're $3,000. No one's going to visit us. That's so expensive. I'm also knowing in my heart, like my husband and I, this duty station was going to be pretty significant because we were going to want to start our family. Then my husband mentions, okay, if we're in Guam, I'm going to have more sea time. So I'm picturing myself like alone on an island pregnant and just, alone. And I'm just overwhelmed. And so, of course, 4 days later, our orders change again because I learned the hard way that verbal orders don't really mean anything until it's in writing. So I had all that meltdown for no reason. And spoiler alert, we never went to Guam. We ended up staying in Connecticut for 3 years. But just that moment I had where you get this news and it's huge and you're overwhelmed and I'm Googling trying to find resources and I couldn't find anything. And I just needed a one-stop shop where I could get some answers to my questions, my fears, silly things like, does Amazon ship there? Like little mundane things that add up to your normal life. And I was just so overwhelmed. And knowing what I know now, Facebook is a wonderful resource for military spouses. There's millions, God knows, millions of Facebook groups, military spouses of X, where you can get information. But I wasn't even at that point yet. Like I was at that very beginning stage of tell me what I need to know about Guam. So I just kept thinking, I can't be the only one who gets, you have this moment, you get so overwhelmed and I just need some answers. And, I love my husband, but, they only help so much. He doesn't know much either. And so that kind of led me to what if there was an online resource where specifically submarines, like this is a submarine duty station.
It's very specialized. Yeah.
Yeah. Very specialized. And I want to hear from other spouses who have done it. Like, tell me what you did.
Right.
And that's really where kind of the inspiration came from. And then when we moved to Connecticut and I interacted with more spouses, of course, anyone I met, it took about 5 minutes to learn, getting to know them, that they had just come from Guam. And they loved it. They said it was the best duty station they had ever been to in their life. They would give anything to go back. And I'm looking at them and I'm like laughing. I'm like, where were you 3 months ago? Like I needed.
Right. That would have been nice to know.
Yes. And I know you've been in Guam, so I'd love to know your experience. But hearing from wives firsthand, like all these amazing things. And I'm like, oh my God, like there are spouses out there who just, they need to hear this. And that's sort of where the blog inspiration came from.
And so then you have guest writers helping you with those locations of all around the world. Yeah.
So we were awesome. So we're a collective group of spouses all over. So we have writers in Guam, Pearl Harbor, Washington State, San Diego, Groton, Connecticut, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and then some of the, Kings Bay, Georgia. But then some of the smaller shore duty stations like Charleston, Millington, Tennessee. I mean, I could go on and on, but
Nice.
yeah. So
Well, and I think you touched on, the active duty person, they may be curious too, but let's be honest, when they get there, they have a built-in thing. They're going to go to their new job. They have it set up. And we're kind of, as any military spouse knows, we've got to figure it out. And so finding those resources can be so tricky and so frustrating. And so I guess my thought would be, as far as, I don't really know a lot about being a submarine spouse, obviously. I will tell you this. When we were stationed at Pearl Harbor Hickam, the spouses group from the Hickam side got to go do a tour of I don't want to say it wrong, a nuclear sub. Like we got to go on board and they showed us, I felt really cool. Like getting to look at all the gear. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, but it was really awesome because, it's a joint base. So as far as other than just, like the specific duty stations, if you think about the life of a military spouse, is there something more unique about a submarine spouse, because they're gone longer, like lack of communication? Just kind of fill us in on what maybe those differences might be.
Yeah. So I think the biggest one that comes to mind, of course, is lack of communication. So I can't speak to other branches. I'm not sure how much, Army wives, Marine wives, get to speak to their husbands or spouses, but submarines. So when they go out to sea, you do not get internet when you're underwater.
Yeah. Right.
So when they go out to sea, like we have no way, you can't Facebook message or text, video chat, Skype, FaceTime, what have you. So we rely solely on email. And when submarines go out to sea, depending on what type of boat your spouse is on, and kind of what their mission is, they do go dark for long periods of time. So emails, it's not a quick thing where you get an email every day. You might not get an email for 5 days. You might get 4 emails in one day, because the boat goes to periscope depth, and that's when, they can send out emails, and you'll just get like a dumping of emails randomly. We have to number our emails in the subject line because what'll happen is, I try to email my husband every couple days. And then when I finally get an email from him after 3 weeks, he's asking me questions I answered 6 emails ago. So you're kind of balancing just this weird communication. And when the boat does go dark, it can be long. So I think the longest I've gone without hearing a word from my husband was maybe 2 months.
And that's so hard. And I know when my husband was deployed to Iraq, for instance, and actually all of his deployments, we never were able to even talk on the phone very much. I mean, once in a while. But I did do the email thing when he was in Baghdad, and he was Air Force. So I think it's the other branches. It may not even be the type of branch. It just may be the type of job they're in. And so we did the email thing too. And it was frustrating because I was like, it was almost like a little journal I would send, because we have 4 kids. So I'd send him a note most evenings, tell him what happened, because I knew I was going to forget. Kind of just like, here's what we did this day, and just kind of had this little running log. And then when he could answer, same sort of thing, he could. But I don't think that, like, if you haven't been through that, the feeling of they are really unreachable, unless there's an emergency, which then in that case, the chain of command can get word to them, but they're really unreachable. It's a very desolate feeling. It's very lonely. So I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Yes, it absolutely does. And it definitely changed once we had our son, because it really felt like I have no way to contact him. And, I would have to keep a running list because I would forget. I try to email him as much as I can, but I would forget little things to tell him. So I would have a running list on my countertop, and I would make bullet points of things to email him or tell him. But
what's the priority?
What's the priority? And then when the boat does go dark, some submarines do what's called family grams. So you're limited to a 250 character count message that has to be sent to a special mysterious email. And that's how the sailors get it. And, there's no punctuation, because 250 characters is not much. It's like a sentence and a half.
It's like a tweet.
Yes. And then I will say, when the submarines do pull into foreign ports, that is our small window where we can talk on the phone. We can video chat.
Nice.
We never know when those are. We never know for how long. It's a constant mystery. And I'd say another big thing with Submarine Life, and again, I'm not sure how much other branches are similar, but there's so much secrecy with submarines. So we literally do not know anything about what our spouses are doing. So we don't know where they're going, for how long, what they're doing, and really the nature of their jobs. I mean, we don't know anything. And so that, I think, can feel really isolating sometimes, because we're fielding questions from in-laws and families and friends. Well, what do you mean you haven't talked to him in 2 months? Well, what do you mean you don't know if you can come to my wedding next year? What do you mean? Well, where is he going? Well, how long is he out? And not being able to talk about it. So my husband got back from a 7-month deployment this fall, and, he couldn't tell me anything. I was just like, well, how'd it go? Like, how are you feeling?
How'd that go?
Like, yeah, the crew's great. We did great. Yeah. Like, I'm really proud of everybody. It was great. And that's it. So I think just kind of balancing that isolation, and I think leaning on other sub-spouses is so valuable, because it's so hard to understand what we do and what we go through, and this isolation. And I think on the other end of it, I don't know if I necessarily want to know what they're doing, right? I don't want to know. I don't know if knowing exactly where he is would make me feel better. I'm sure that would make me more nervous and give me more anxiety. But I don't know. I think it's something to be said where we literally know nothing, and we somehow function and manage our households and raise our kids and work jobs and figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I think if you are like an organized type A person, like you said, you tend to be, it is almost harder because it's so hard to plan for the unknown. And then there is a point where you just become comfortable with that, because there's nothing, you can't change it if you're in the military. I mean, are the submarine spouses pretty tight knit group? It would seem to me like you'd have to be, because it's so specialized.
Yes, I think so. And I think because we're such a small community, there's less than 10 core duty stations, that it's very common, that hopefully, if you interact with enough people, you move to a new duty station and you actually already know 3 people who got there a few months before you, and you can really lean on each other.
Good. Well, what do you find some of the unique challenges, other than, the communication is a big one, but are there any other challenges you're seeing with submarine families? I know you're kind of new to the life, but you've been in it a few years. Are you seeing something that's kind of predominant as far as what the families are facing?
Yeah, I would say, it's just a lot of unknown, like I said before. So, not knowing where you're moving in 6 months or, there's a lot of issues with housing right now. So we just PCS'd back to Washington State in September. There's an 18-month waiting list to get onto base housing. And so thankfully I found our house through another sub-spouse, through a Facebook group, to rent out her house. But, I think just it's the constant change and the constant not knowing what's changing and trying to prepare for things you're not prepared for. And I think with families, and I think this is probably true for all military branches, but it's just, the constant coming and going. Submarines go out to sea kind of constantly for weird periods. And I think in some ways, the constant coming and going is worse than the deployments. Dad, he's home for 2 weeks. He's gone for a month. He's home for 2 days. He's gone for 4 days. He's, the constant back and forth, and leading up to deployment is really difficult too, because there's a lot of that. They're going out and training, doing exercises, and just preparing for the real thing. And you're at home just kind of trying to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally. And I think that just presents a lot of stress too.
I would agree with that. I always preferred it if they would just go and be gone for a block of time. And my husband's last 10 years were the back and forth. And it was just like a laundry dump back out the door. And it's just like you get into a routine, and then it gets all this upheaval, and you want to welcome them back. But then you're like, well, we have this really great routine going, and it's exhausting actually. And I don't think you realize how abnormal it is until you get out and you go, wow, did we really live that way? People don't live this way, right? Well, are there any specialized resources for submarine families that the Navy provides, or is it something you guys have had to kind of figure out on your own?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really great programs. Like we have Fleet and Family, which is a
Hmm.
wonderful resource just for, like it says, family. So a lot of family counseling, family resources. They do that really great program like Budget for Baby. They work really closely with FRGs, so family readiness
Hmm.
groups. So I would really encourage any subspouses, if they are attached to a boat, to get involved in their FRG. I know those groups sometimes tend to have a bad rap, just
Yeah.
because a lot of women and a lot of female energy. But I've had really positive experiences with mine. I think to be in a community where everyone's going through the exact same thing that you're going through at the exact same time is so valuable and should not be overlooked. Like, get involved with your FRG, get a great relationship with your ombudsman, who's a family liaison, who
Mhm.
is kind of the connector between the families and the submarine and squadron. So they're the people you reach out to if you have emergency issues, other personal family things happening. And then the one big program I wish I would have known about when I first got married was Compass.
Oh, I've
So
heard of
Compass,
that.
yeah, so Compass is a program. It's through the Naval Services Family Line, and I don't think that's just unique to submarines, just the Navy in general. But it's basically classes you can take. You can take it at any time. You don't have to be a newlywed, but it teaches spouses kind of like the ins and outs of Navy life, Navy mission, history, customs and traditions.
Hmm.
PCSC and deployment resources. And I think with COVID, they're doing online classes, which is really great, and more flexible for people. But that's a really great program.
Yeah. Yeah. We had something similar in the Air Force. It's called Key Spouse, and same kind of thing. I always encouraged younger spouses or spouses whose service member was about to deploy, like, get connected, because even if you don't think you need it right now, you're good. I've got it all under control. You just don't know what could happen or what you might need later on. Like, okay, for instance, trying to drive in the gate and you've lost your ID card. Who do you call? So
Mhm.
something simple like that, to just, because a lot of spouses are like, I don't need support. I'm good to go. I have my own community. And I just think there's always strength in numbers. There's nothing wrong with having more assistance and help than you end up using. It's just better to have that buffer, is my opinion. So I would just definitely, second what you just said about connecting, even though they may have a bad rap sometimes. I have known some amazing spouses, and I've known some younger spouses who were skeptical and then would go to a group and were like, you know what, I'm really glad I did this. And it kind of saved my life as
Yeah.
far as the duty station goes.
100%. And with COVID too, I mean, if I
Yeah.
didn't have my FRG, my husband was deployed for 7 months, and it was during COVID. So they had to quarantine on the pier for 2 weeks before the boat actually, went underway. And that
Oh,
was the
goodness.
worst experience because we had two goodbyes. We had the emotional, physical goodbye. I drove him, dropped him off at the pier. And then 2 weeks later, I had to watch the submarine go out to sea. And it was just like an emotional roller coaster. And he was
Oh,
just on the pier, and he could call me every day and talk to me. And I was just like, I
like,
need you to go. Like, I need you to go. This is so hard. And there's
yeah.
no way I would have survived 7 month deployment without my FRG because, you have friends and family check in on you, which is so great. And I'm very lucky to have great friends and family. But again, to be with women and other spouses who are going through it too right now at the
Hmm.
same
Hmm.
time. And especially when the boat would go dark and it would be a long, long period of just nothing. Planning coffee meetups or playground dates, we called them,
Hmm.
anything, and then we'd throw a big halfway night halfway through deployment, which was fun to
Hmm.
look forward to. So it's just, I'm all about that. Like, just surround yourself with a great community of support.
That's awesome. Well, and do you guys tend to know when they're returning, or is it sort of an iffy sort of thing? Like, it could be between here and this date, and then we'll let you know like the day before you arrive.
Yeah, the last one. Yes. So
Oh,
we get a homecoming date, and the date's never technically classified. Like, for OPSEC reasons, we're not encouraged to
right.
talk about it, of course. But yeah, we'll get a homecoming date. It'll probably change no less than 5 times, and
Hmm.
then you get the final confirmation like 2 days before that. Okay, yep,
Yeah.
it's happening on this day. Um, but yeah, so but that's really all we know. And then when they do pull into port, we get 24 hours notice.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
yeah, and so you're on the phone tree, and when you get that call, you always take that call. Um,
Yes.
Yeah, but yes, so me being type A and a planner, like that was something I learned immediately when I married my husband, was that out the window. I mean, and even like he's on shore tour right now, so he's not attached to a specific submarine, and he still goes out to sea occasionally. And I mean, things happen, and you can plan as much as you can, but he's gone right now. He wasn't supposed to be gone, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's part of this life, and you kind of get to a point where you just kind of have to laugh about it and have a good sense of humor, because you can't plan.
No, you cannot. And I tell you, there was one deployment. We were living in Germany, and I was asking partly because Air Force does it very differently. Sometimes they go out in a group, sometimes it's just ones and twos. And he came home early, which is not necessarily a good thing to do unannounced, because it was Germany, and you sleep with your windows open there because there's no AC. So it was for his mid tour. That's what it was. And I heard a car door slam in the middle of the night. I look out my window, and it's a cop. And I see somebody getting out. I'm like, what is happening? Because he wasn't supposed to come home until the next week. So he'd caught an early flight out of the Middle East to Ramstein, because we were at Ramstein. So it was like a major hub. And then he was at the military airport, and he saw a friend that's a cop, happened to be a cop, and was like, can you drop me off?
Oh my gosh.
I almost murdered him. I was like, don't ever do that to me again. I mean, welcome home, honey. But my God, what are you doing? I was like, what's happening? Is somebody coming to tell me something? And who's this person? Yeah. So I guess they can't really surprise you in a sub.
No, they really can't. They really can't. They can surprise you with bad news, but
we're not coming. Haha.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you have a pretty big send off and homecoming, which is nice, I think, for the families to have those occasions to mark the time. I think that's
It depends on the type of submarine and the base, because certain submarine bases, we like spouses can't have access to lower base, and so maybe the homecoming's like in a field. Mm-hmm. but yeah, no, we definitely we can have those moments, and that's what I lived for. That's what got me through deployment. I would just listen to music and daydream, but I also knew, you build up so much for homecoming. Right, you also need to be realistic, and kind of like, your sailor is exhausted, and you play it in your head like a movie for months, and it's still a beautiful day. But for us, it was like, Connecticut, end of summer. It was so humid. It was like 95 degrees. You're standing on cement under like kind of a sad tent for like 3 hours. I don't know why they make you go so early. It was like 3 hours. I had my toddler with me. It was nap time. It was just a nightmare. My in-laws were there, thankfully. But, he was screaming his head off. So by the time the boat finally pulled in, and submarines are very anticlimactic. So the boat pulls in and it takes forever. It's with a tug, like it's brought in. And then they have to, do what they have to do to get the boat tied up. I'm not using terminology, but it's okay. But they tie the boat up, and then you're just staring at the sub for probably 45 minutes until it actually gets off of it. You know what I mean? And then
oh my gosh,
we do the first hug. Yes, we do the first hug, first kiss, the new babies, like all the sweet things, and then very slowly they come off the boat. So but obviously it's a beautiful day, but it's the things you don't see behind the scenes.
Right. Navy has some really good photos of all their homecomings. They're always like so epic. So yeah, I think homecoming is homecoming. And then that reintegration period and that time after is the same no matter what branch you're in, because you have to get used to each other again and do all those things and just get through it. Well, as we're kind of winding down, I love your attitude. I love that you're proactive and just your outlook. So I would love for you to share, if you were going to give a military spouse some advice about keeping a positive mindset, like how have you managed that?
Yeah. And that's a hard one, because I think as much as we can be super positive, like this life is not easy. It's not for the weary. It's very emotional. It's very stressful. I mean, there's so many things about it. But I think like I could sit here and I can think of all the reasons to feel sorry for myself. Like in this moment, it's so hard to move every 2 to 3 years. It's hard being away from friends and family. You can think about all the things like pivoting my career, finding someone who would hire me as a military spouse, and that's like totally separate. We could have a separate podcast episode
Right.
about
Yep.
that. Or thinking about all the things, or, oh, my husband was out to sea 9 months this year. Like I could go on and on.
Mhm.
But I think like it's okay to feel salty. Like that's what we call it, like over salty, and I think it feels salty. Like give yourself that space to feel it. Allow yourself to sit in those feelings. But I always have to come out of it because this is my life. I love my husband. I chose my husband. I would do it 1,000 times over. It's worth it. But I just choose, instead of focusing on the hard stuff all the time, like taking a step back and thinking about like what value this lifestyle has given to my life. So I think of all the little mundane things that like civilian families, no detriment to them, but they take for granted that we don't have. So I think of like last weekend taking my son to a children's museum, and there's all these families, and there's dads and moms, and I'm alone with him, and he's in the terrible twos, he's biting me, like, and I'm alone, and I'm just carrying my diaper bag and just figuring it out, or taking things for granted, like, oh, my husband's actually home for a weekend. We can go to Costco together.
Right.
We can go to Costco and
you'll have help.
I'll have help. Yeah. He can help me bring things into the house, or he can wrangle our toddler in the cart. Or, God forbid, I can go get my nails done on a Saturday and my husband's home and he's kicking me out of the house and giving me a break, or, getting family photos taken and actually knowing how to schedule that, or, booking plane tickets 6 months in advance because that you can go to so-and-so's wedding. Like, I mean, just basic things in life that like we just don't have. And I think on the flip side, how much we do appreciate when we do get that. And that's something I feel so strongly. And, I have a lot of people say to me all the time, Chelsea, I don't know how you do it. I could never do what you do. And I really hate that statement because, and it comes from such a good place, but I never know what to say. And it's just sort of a weird thing. And I kind of just say to them, just imagine the person you love. This is their job. Like, this is their calling. This is their passion. They chose to serve their country. This is what they do, something bigger than them. And it comes with these sacrifices. And you don't know how I do it. I do it because I love him. I love my husband. It's that simple. And I love our life. And I think of, before I met him, I had never lived outside of Washington State. I didn't have a passport. I'd never really traveled far. So never in my life did I think I would live in places like Monterey, California, or New England. And who knows, Guam, Hawaii. Yeah. I mean, there's so many places, and they were over in Europe, anywhere. And I think, wow, that's really tough. And the constant change and not being able to plan is so difficult, but it's really exciting too. And I think trying, when you are feeling really salty and you're having a really hard time, like, try to remember what you love about this life and what you have because of it. I've made so many great friendships, so many great friends. And it's so wonderful. Like, we just PCS'd, but I still have friends back in Connecticut checking in on me. And it's a beautiful thing. And I just think if I had never met my husband and we didn't have this life, sure, I could be married to some guy who works at Amazon and he's always home and we can plan things, but I would never want that over what I have right now. So I would just encourage anyone who's feeling salty to try to remember that.
That's so good. And you do need to hold on to that, because I think my husband has been retired for a few years, and I forget sometimes to appreciate the fact that he's here most of the time. And you forget, like, you have that, you're going to have another transition whenever he does get out of the military, that you have to figure out life together. And when my husband was newly retired, my car had broken down and I just dealt with it. Like, I called the tow truck, I called the insurance, and then I got home and he goes, I'm here. Why didn't you let me know? And I was like, I just went into default mode. I didn't even think about, oh yeah, he could come get me.
Yes. And see, I love that. I think that's another huge benefit. It's like we become so fiercely independent because we have to be. And I think that that's so strong. And I have friends who are like, oh my God, like, because I had to sell our house in Connecticut while my husband was deployed. And then, and I have friends who buy houses with power of attorneys while their husbands are,
Right.
like we have to just keep.
It's normal to us.
It's normal. But I think what a cool, like bragging, right? Like you did that on your own, girl. Like I love it.
Yeah. Well, and we did a lot of things alone, for 30 years. And it's hard to remember that I don't have to do that anymore. Still, here 3 to 4 years later, I'm working on it. I'm working on asking for help. I'm really bad about that and a little stubborn, but I never got the memo that I've seen spouses, and I'm sure you have too, that didn't settle in well and didn't do well. And I, like you said, maybe I didn't know what I signed up for, but when I got into it, I just wanted to make it work, and I wanted it to be a good marriage. And so I never got the memo of just give up or you can't do this. We just figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
End of story. Like, yeah. Not to say it's always easy, and not to be, there are definitely challenges, and we talk about that a lot on this podcast. So you guys know that listen to me, that I definitely acknowledge all the challenges, but there does come a point where you have to figure it out to make this life work.
And one thing I would add too is when you are feeling salty, like when my husband was deployed, some weeks were harder than others. And I think knowing yourself and what you're going through, sometimes I would have to really pull away from social media. Because it's just little things, like when you see, like if your husband's out at sea and you have other civilian friends who are, getting their summer family photos taken, or they're on vacation, and, and they're just living their life, and, you can't hate them, but you have moments where you're just, man, that would be nice. Right. Or, your mom lives right down the road and she can babysit for you all the time. My mom lives 3,000 miles away. But again, like feeling sorry for yourself, I think just, knowing that and protecting yourself. And so for me, what would really help is just when I was feeling that way would be to just like take a breath and just not look at social media, or we would just make silly memes for our blog.
That's good advice, though. That's really good advice. Yes. And I love your memes.
Yeah. So it's funny with our blog because we really started focused on resources. So we were really just sharing, duty station guides, kind of how-tos, how to survive your first deployment, how to prepare your kids for deployment, just really tactical stuff. And then as time went on and we were engaging with our fans and readers more, the memes really took off. So we find inspiration for them kind of just from whatever we're going through. And that's sort of the fun part is, depending on who made the meme, you can kind of tell that one of us, our husbands, may be deployed, or the other's going through reintegration, or, whatever. But we just have fun kind of poking fun at ourselves. And I think as hard as this life is, and being a sub-spouse and just going through what we go through, it's nice to take a moment and kind of just find something to chuckle about and make light of the situation and kind of the silliness that we go through. And everyone really responds well to them, which kind of just signals to us that it's a reminder that we're all going through what we go through collectively. And it's really empowering to know we're not alone.
I think humor and laughter is the key. As we're trying to finish here, we keep getting cut off by bad internet and weather. So I don't want to risk it any further, but thank you, Chelsea, so much for coming on and sharing your experience. I know it's going to be helpful for other submarine spouses and for military spouses in general.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me and creating this great space for military spouses.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much. And listeners, go check out the Submerged Life. Definitely follow them on social media so you can get some good laughs and amazing resources for submarine spouses. So thanks everybody for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Mil-Spouse Matters podcast. Connect with me at jen-mcdonald.com, where you can find a free deployment devotional and other resources, or on social media as @MilSpouseMatters. You can find my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, on Amazon and other booksellers. Love the show? Please leave a 5-star review in whatever podcast player you're listening, and then share it with someone else who could use it too. Until next time, remember, you are brave, you are strong, and you've got this.